Hey everyone, hope everybody's doing well, blessed, and enjoying family. As always, muchas gracias to everyone for everyone's words, wishes, prayers, as the love and support everybody shares and sends my way. From the heart, thank you. And well, getting right into it, today I want to touch on a Billy that I personally met as a camarada, right? And that there was a couple things as camarada that I personally didn't like, but again, he was working his avenue, right? Working with his steel, and as a campolero, you don't get in other people's business, right? You allow them to do their push. But later on, way later on, it became a personal thing because I personally got at him under some conditions, but let me make sense of it, right? When I got to Pelican Bay, it's definitely real difficult to touch base with one another, right? But when I first got there, I was still in contact with Raul, right, from Riverside or Corona. And of course, he himself not had been long since he left the Bay. He was just going to parole. He got sent to Quilmas. And anyways, he guided me to certain individuals that were trustworthy as a righteous camarada or Billy that cares will do so, right? So, anyways, he addressed me to, well, we won't do that. We'll address him as he's out now, right? Which is Luis Ramirez from West Side Riva. Now I understand he lived in a town nearby, but off the head, I don't recall the town I dispense in. But nevertheless, you know, homie was doing his thing for Tortuga and for other Pilis from the IE, right, that were there at the moment. And, I didn't agree with a few things, but nevertheless, took note. I shared them with Raul, and it was what it was, right? But I already knew it's like, you're a homie, you don't agree with it, distance yourself, but don't put even a palabra against another Pilis and soldados things, because it will bring negativity towards you, right? So, anyways, I do want to talk though about Tweety, right? From Moreno Valley 13. He was an older homie. I don't really know how old the gang is or what, but he was an older homie, right? At least older than myself. And he was sitting back there, right? As all of us, really. I always say staying relevant. There is a lot of camaradas that are back there that were put back there over BS. It's just straight up, right? Goon Squad at one point was going crazy with the validations in the sense that even a conversation, they were trying to pin it as a point, right? To get you validated. And of course, there was a lot of weenies on the yard that made up stuff and told the squad, and they tried to use that also, right? Which were lies. But anyways, Tweety was back there, and he didn't want to be dead weight, right? So he offered his servicio, put himself in this position again with Turtle and well, we just say a couple Pilis, right? That were back there, and he was pulling gente. Maybe not to the extent as Luis, because I guess Luis had a lot more pull when it came to people on the streets, right? But regardless, he wasn't just standing still, right? Just taking room. He was still having, for example, his neighborhood or homies or I don't know, whichever angle he was working, sending respects, right, to Pilis, and it's still an income, right? You're there and you're programming and you're putting something in a Pilis pocket, which is more so what they look. Nevertheless, he was busted for killing somebody from West Side Riva or Riverside, and it's street stuff, right? That should not matter, should not, unless it's a family member or a member, it should not be an issue. At the end of the day, it's game banging on the streets. And, it's what I always say, there are certain winnings that try to pinpoint how individuals sometimes are young, but they're game bangers. You're not gonna ask their age as they're shooting at you, right? Or banging on you. It's basically game banging and it's how it goes. Sorry I say that, but I started young and, you know, it was what it was. Nobody hesitated towards me and I didn't hesitate towards nobody. It's just part of. Now, is that bad? No. You shooting and like hitting a side liner, right? An innocent person. It don't matter if he's a child, lady, whatever. If he's not involved, then it should be an issue, right? But anyways, again, Luis had a lot of jugo. I don't know how much earlier than myself he was already in the Bay. But again, he was touching in with Raul, you know, and that's why we were conversating. Because again, I was known as Raul Corona's kid, right? And with Turtle from Colton, well, a few individuals, right? This is about him, not third parties, right? And he had a lot of love up into the point where the homie's paperwork got around, right? Out of respect. If you've been up there, yes, the 128 G's, Mando, lockup order. But you also, you know, if you want to really put your whole paperwork out there or you're requested to, you're going to shoot your court transcripts, right? Which is the best thing if you got nothing to hide, which he did. And when it got back to Luis, sorry, I keep wanting to say his nickname, but Luis, and he didn't like what he read, right? That why he was busted, why the homie Tweety was busted was a game war, right? I guess he was out there and they should have been in the wrong. Just straight up, right? He was out with Familia and they hit him up. He responded and it's real clear on the paper. They started dumping, right? It's just the homie pool and he got the best of the situation. And he ended up hitting one and killing another homie from Riverside, West Side Riva. And with that, Luis picked up anger towards the homie. And since they were from IE, right, around the same area, they well, they had to rub not specifically elbows, but one thing met the other, right? Instead of helping each other's Luis was already a better politicker as a camarada, right? Again, the homie wasn't really involved like that. It's just he was around the individuals that had the yardas, and you know, squad snatched him up, and he wasn't going to tell squad, hey, you know, it ain't me and Soul, cause us, you guys know. So he took it on the chin and got validated, right? But again, he was starting. He was starting to earn the respects. He was starting to converse with Billy's. It's just, you know, it's basically college. The Bay was college, right? You graduate and you go up to the Bay and you meet you meet them individuals, right? As Corcoran B Yard and Tehachapi B Yard, right? And anyways, it got to the point where somehow, some way, you know, he had a couple hyenas that were helping Tweety, and they basically put out some work out in West Side Riva without mentioning to Luis, nor to Turtle, or you know, and his eyes is where he was green, right? And his eyes, it was gonna be an income for the Billy. He didn't need to explain himself like, oh, I'm doing this, you know, which in reality you have to, right? I'm going in the city, you know, I got these two girls from there. They could pull him something, and the Billy's gonna reply, hey, well, I got this worker there. He has his people. Let me get at him, give him the heads up, you know, to avoid bumping heads. It's just common sense, right? And he never did that though. To him, it was gonna be a real light surprise to the Billy, right? But it wasn't like that, cause Luis, it was his territory. You know, even though at the moment he was a camarada, right? He was still functioning out there. It was his hood, and he it was given to him by numerous of people from IE. So he felt, or even after the explanations, he still pressed for homeboy Tweety trying to get in his boundaries, which makes no sense. Think about it. You know, I understand the homie, that's his hood. He's been in there doing his thing, whatever. But Tweety from Moreno Valley, he's part of their team. Just keep that in mind. They're functioning, responding, putting dope money into the same Billy's pocket because it's the same area, right? They're working, and it's what a lot of camaradas that don't really have that background, they go back to what they know and the people they have, right, to stay relevant. But to make a long story short, he pressed the issue so much. You know, I'm not gonna put this on Tweety, but I guess there was some bad material that when this argument was happening got put out on the street, and there was losses. You know, I said it once, I say it again. You know, every time you move candy, you have to be ready to chuck up the losses because they're always going to happen. You know, of course, you got to know the ropes to move candy too. You know, you got to have a receiver. What I mean by that is someone that knows what he's looking at, tester, test it, how it feels. You know, most of just by feeling it and looking at it, you know, right? But anyways, when you're new and you're starting off, I know it probably feels great, right? I got two down homegirls that are willing to do trips and work with us. So of course you want to bring them to the table right away, and earn points that way, right? But it don't work. You always got to stay conscious on the steps you take. Cause remember, we don't. You could say, something happens, we'll go to war with other races, but the war that never ends is the ones amongst us. Camarada looking for a reason to take down a camarada, or a pili looking to get into another pili's territory and knock him down. There is no such thing as carnalismo, especially in the shoes, right? When they were all there, it's everybody trying to survive. The only way to survive, unfortunately, was by showing power, better clecha on the next man. It's just the way the program was set. Anyways, the backlash came back on Tweety. Supposedly, it was one of his girls that he sold to a couple of people that it went bad for them, right? And I don't believe it to be true. I'll be honest, right? When I filled out my report, right, to Raul, because I got asked what was going on up there, and if it was true really about Tweety, right? I straight told him I don't think so. You know, I really think I've been noticing what's been talked, right? And Luis don't like Tweety. He feels he's encroaching in what belongs to him. And Raul's answer was exactly what it was, right? What it is. Nothing belongs to a camarada. If Billys are allowing the other individual, this camarada has to fall in line and work with that. But there is camaradas that they got that orgullo in their mind. They soy el más chingón type, right? And anyways, long story short, Tweety had a celly. There weren't too many homies still with cellies, but he had a celly. And eventually, Luis got the okay from Turtle to clip Tweety. You know, Tweety Selly had more game, more clecha, been around more, right? The homie from he was from Hasser. We'll just leave it at that. And he took care of Tweety. The order was to take him out though, right? But the homie in the cell must have known it was a bad call. When you're cellies, if it's a good individual, you share things out of respect. You analyze characters, way of thinking, not in what's happening outside the cell, but what's happening in the cell with one and what's happening in the real world, right? They share with you or you share with them. You're able to analyze and really dissect an individual's mind in ways. So I'm thinking the homie just felt it was a wrong call. He booked them, not not even many times, right? Just to get him out the cell, and well, you guys know the rest. But anyways, that was left at that, right? After that, it was a message here and there to either Turtle or Luis from Raul while he was still alive. But it was more so on a favorite tip, right? For example, Raul, hey, I got 80K out here. You know, since you're out there, could you have someone pick it up and take it here, or a couple ladrillos, or them type of favors. It was never as a working thing, right? And anyways, fast forward, right, to where we're in Becca Ranza Nayari in the prison. I told this story about the homie little man, right? He's a straight warrior. I met him in the shoe. He was he was holding a supporting me for the Pili, right? And it's a good individual. Now I kept doing time, but he paroled, and like I said it before, right? They sent him on a mission out there to Nayarit, where basically a captain from the judicial would not fall in line, and they sent him to clip him. So the homie studied him, knew where he lived, everything, and he just had bad luck, right? You could say, but he still pulled it through, excuse me, because he walked up to the window, tried to dome him, jam the the damn piece jam, but he didn't give up, right? That's a soldado. He pulled out a matapuercos or a filero, and he took care of business. He he took that man's life, right? Nevertheless, you guys know it's a lot more time required with a knife, right? And then you do it in a suburban area when everyone knows you're a policeman or judicial. Right away, you got busted. You know, when I came through, like I said, I met his jefita. I met, he wasn't right in the head no more because of the butt whoopings that he had received inside. But, if you sat down with him, homie was hurt. That his jefita preferred him in jail than out because he felt he was going to hurt people. And that wasn't even the case, right? But nevertheless, it was a decision the family made to have him stay inside, right? But he had been sentenced to 28 years, yeah, 27 something, 28 years, something like that, right? But the way Mexico works is you could pay with money. Every day you could pay with money. I forgot how much it is. I think it's the minimum pay per day in Mexico, right? They add it up and you could pay it. It was like 100 and something thousand right at the moment. So, anyways, when we got the back door open on us, I promised little man from Moreno Valley I would reach out, and he personally knew Luis. Like on a good tip. They were good camaradas. So that's what little man said, right? That he had heard he had been made, and to get at him, he was born in the States. He would report and help him, right? But again, that's the misbelief that we have, right? That a Billy will go out his way for one of his soldados. That's just not gonna happen. It had been years since they were together, right? When little man put on for the Bay, and the the Billy had everything sort of all West Side, Riva, and others, right? What can a camarada offer by himself, right? And that had been busted for years to bring to the table, hey, pay this, and I'll go over there and support you. I didn't see the Pili, but I bet he laughed. Because I got on the cuerno with him. Literally, I got on the phone with him and I told him, look, hey, little man Miguel? And he told me, yeah, it's like, all that, wow, wow, wow. And then he told me what happened with him. And I go, you know about the mission? He said, yeah, the homie pulls it true. Yeah, well, he's a bandit here in Nayarit, in the worst place where we, they don't like us. And I go, he's been sentenced. His fine, I believe it was like 120 something, something to that effect, right? Thousand, which in reality, it was nothing, right, for someone making that much money as Luis. Because it's what, like 6,000, $7,000. But when I told him he wanted me to tell you this, and that he has a big family from the hood and he would be able to bring more to you and pay you back if you're doing the favor, right? And I told him, look, the homies programming, unfortunately, we could stomp in, if not on a daily, every so often there, something happened, he got beaten with bats, he lost a little bit common sense, right? Not to put any negativity on the homie. But he says he'll get you back. He has some angles out here too that he could bring to the table, which he said, look, camarada, dispensa. I know the homie is a good homie, but you more so than anybody should understand is collateral damage. I'm not gonna send nobody to get him out because it's gonna bring tail, and I'm not gonna go on my way for him. Dispensa, he knew what everyone says, right? He signed up for. He has to do his time and come back, and then we'll see what's up. And what could I say? I tell him, okay, muchas gracias. I'll relay the message. And, you know, I don't know, me personally, camaradas, I got mad love for them, period, point blank. For the homies in my hood, man, I love every single one of them. Even if I always been busted and, some might not know me just by name, I will never speak negative about them. Some, well, some vato commented on a video, right? And I'm just gonna say, homie, I know who you is, and I'll just say this. You're reading wrong into the message. You know, you're speaking well of a rata. We'll just leave it at that. But anyways, back to Little Man. I never did tell him. I told him I related the message and that he was gonna respond to him by himself. I just didn't have it in me to tell the camarada, right? After everything he's done, basically you're on your own. I sat down with his Zafita and says, I don't want him out. We could get the money, but we're not. He needs to be in here. And it's sad, when your family gets tired like that. When those you hold loyal and throw everything for to complete the mission, just say you're collateral damage. Don't even mention my name. For a while, we stood nearby. I used to. There's an estafeta or a place they pick up things on site, right? I used to go in, give his name, send him an apoyo. I remember sending him a Xbox and some feria here and there, because you have to pay bofe, you have to pay your bed. Basically, if the cartel decides to throw a party, everyone has to pay for the banda and the pisto, and if you don't have it, they're gonna they're gonna beat you in, you know. So I'm not near that state now that I can't stop in. I did talk to him. Well, it don't matter. The homie's still in there solo bolo. He only gets to see Jefita and receive something once a year. But it's sad, and unfortunately it's true, right? We all know what we signed for. But it just goes to show, that even though we know what we signed for, there's no carnalismo. There is no pili or señor de honor that will back you up in any way. You see, I believe, I, I don't know the intel, I'll be honest, but I believe cold hearted that Luis Ramirez got made once Jalisco kicked in as a powerhouse because of his family in Jalisco. Right now, He's one of the Billies that he can function. And what I mean by function is there is Billies that need camaradas to touch or tap into avenues, pipelines, jale. Luis is a complete Billy. He don't need that. He has the gente to bring what he wants, to put out what he wants. So, we're not gonna measure in power, but we'll just say he has a single cover. But if Little Man could be forgotten or thrown aside that easy, imagine those doing holler for him. Where do they stand? You're gonna go in and sit down and get ignored because they're on the line. It don't matter if you're responding with Luis. Let's just say you fall on the line with let's just say Babo. I mean Tablas, excuse me. Tablas don't want to hear you're touching up with Luis. You're gonna follow Tablas program, so it means nothing. You get what I'm saying? At the end of the day, you could give up everything for nothing. That's why I say stay true, loyal to those that deserve it and are loyal to you. That's not the worst thing, you staying solo in a Mexican prison. Remember, we're not liked. It's not about doing time. It's about once a week at least you going down to where they have the nasty bathrooms, right? Clay bathrooms. And about 10, 15 dudes are going to work on you. Then they're going to put you to scratch them bathrooms nasty, nasty with their nails. Just because you're a sureño. But there's different angles of being forgotten. So again, stay true to your neighborhood, to your loved ones. Stay true to yourself and loyal to loved ones.
This is what we always